Hi, everybody. I'm Brittany Lewis, a breaking news reporter here at Forbes. Joining me now is John Denton, Secretary General of the International Chamber of Commerce. Secretary General, thank you so much for joining me.
It's great to be with you, and thank you on Friday afternoon.
I know it is great to be with you, especially after this whirlwind week regarding tariffs. So I want to get into it, and I want to get into where we are right now because, as we've seen in the past 48 hours, that could really change. So the U.S. Court of International Trade ruled against President Trump's tariffs on dozens of countries, saying he exceeded his authority by imposing them. Less than 24 hours later, a federal appeals court ruled the tariffs can stay in effect for now. So to start off the conversation, what do you make of this legal back and forth regarding the tariffs?
Well, first of all, it's a challenging legal situation for, I think, the administration to be in, because I don't think this was where they planned to be. I think they saw that the reliance on the Emergency Act was actually going to provide them with quite a broad range and quite a wide set of opportunities in terms of pursuing their agenda. But clearly that's been challenged now, but also, what people thought was written in ink is now kind of written in pencil. So that's a complication. All that being said, and in a way, the legal to and fro could be interesting. But the reality for business is that all it does is really continue the uncertainty, and in many respects multiplies the uncertainty, because now it's unclear what will be the next move outside the legal process. I know, and I've seen that the Office of the President is talking about alternate strategies, but they're in the end still confident, I think, that if they have the matter that was determined against them in the Court of International Trade taken all the way through the appeal process, they may still succeed there, because ultimately, what will the Supreme Court decide if that's where it gets to on the nature and extent of presidential powers. But as I said, that's kind of a interesting legal issue for people to ponder about. But as a business person, am I any clearer today about what the environment is in which I'm operating? If I'm in the US, or if I'm in a country seeking to export to the US or thinking about investment in the US? No. In fact, my situation is not any better.
Yeah, arguably there are more questions. So I'm curious what those questions really are for the international business community, in your opinion, because there was already plenty of uncertainty. Now there's even more because, as we know right now, the tariffs are back in effect until at least June 9th. Let's say this goes to the Supreme Court and the ruling holds that the tariffs are unlawful. The Trump administration will have to pay back those duties that anyone has paid. But other than that, how does the international business community deal with this? What are the big questions they have?
Well, there's a couple of things. First of all, with all due respect to the legal process, the president is actually very clear, as is this administration, that they see the imposition of tariffs as critical to the long-term strategy they have for rebalancing the US economy. So I'm not convinced that this one issue, the way it's been handled at one court of first instance, even though it was obviously three judges there, is actually going to thwart the direction of travel, which is actually what policies do we need to put in place to enable a rebalancing of the US economy, to a much stronger manufacturing base. That's it. And also, nothing I've seen would say the administration is taking one step back from engaging in, I suppose, pursuit of how can the US ensure its economic supremacy in the 21st century. These are all legitimate policy aims. These are all I suppose it's the mandate upon which the president was elected. So I understand that. But what it means for business is not to just observe all that, is how do we respond? Because now we just don't know. We know that's the direction of travel, but we don't know the mechanism that will be used. We don't know if they're going to seek to apply different forms of negotiating leverage in order to achieve an outcome. We don't know if the baseline 10% can actually be held on to. We don't know, for example, if you were the UK government and you signed that arrangement, which actually had the 10% in there, that might almost be like vanishing ink now, may well disappear. How do we make a decision about the nature and the extent of goods that we actually need to stockpile in order to prepare ourselves to actually engage in supply chains which touch the US? So all these elements are uncertain. So what we're trying to do with the business community is find those points of certainty. I think the direction of travel is very clear from the president, but I think we then have to look at the reality that the US only accounts for 13% of global trade. What that says, Brittany, is that there's 87% of the rest of global trade is actually governed by governments that actually want to continue with an effective and functioning rules-based multilateral trading system. So our job is to recognize that reality and continue to see how we can make that work and to stop a global trade war, because that would be devastating.
And what that reality just sounded like to me is, hey, the US economy, it's the biggest economy, but it's only a sliver. I mean, are you saying then that international business community is almost going to push the United States aside and all work together without them?
No, what we're saying is that we actually want a system that operates. We would be delighted if the US administration worked with us to ensure that system also reflected what they needed. And the US administration has legitimate gripes and complaints about the way the system currently operates. And we are working to actually to revitalize that system to make it relevant. But that's the US administration. Fact is, US business also wants to participate in a global trading system. They actually also have an interest. They have subsidiaries in Indonesia. They have partnerships in Zambia, all around the world. They don't want those economies to crater. They also want those subsidiaries and partnerships and joint ventures and investments to be successful. So it's important for them that the system continues to function to enable the economies in which those entities in which they're invested can actually continue to prosper. What we've got is not any attempt by the global business community to do anything other than seek to engage with the U.S. administration to understand better how we can revitalize the system to align with interests. But at this point in time, we just need to keep the system functioning. So stabilizing the system is really important, and also stopping the threat of a global trade war. The reality is that the US on its own can't actually, at 13%, create a global trade war. That'll only happen if everyone retaliates. Well, what we're saying and what we're urging is do not retaliate. Do what the Australians have done and said, we will not retaliate. Do what the Brits have done, said we will not retaliate. ASEAN countries have said they won't retaliate. So we've got to a point now where we think we can avoid the risk of a global trade war. There's certainly going to be interruptions, but a global trade war would have been devastating and knocked GDP growth out of the park in terms of a negative.
And if I was a business leader, what I would be doing is, as you said, in this time of uncertainty, and clearly these legal battles have added another layer to that uncertainty, I'd be looking for the points of certainty. As you said, I would also have my eye on the potential negotiations here. And after the court ruled that the tariffs were unlawful, and before the appeals court struck down that ruling, the National Economic Council Director, Kevin Hassett, said this, that the administration is on the cusp of 3 trade deals and many more are on the way. I mean, what do you make of that?
Well, 2 things. First of all, just on the issue of what I'd be doing is business looking for certainty, but I would also be pulling back from any big decisions on capital allocation. There is actually, we would call it a tax on uncertainty, because what's happening is people are slowing down decision making, which will actually slow down economic growth. With respect to the negotiating consequences that flow from the decision by the Court of International Trade, well, clearly it changes some of the leverage, doesn't it? I mean, it's just.
I was going to ask that. I mean, if I'm another country and I hear that 2 federal courts in the span of less than 24 hours said, hey, the tariffs are unlawful, suddenly I feel like I have a little more leverage, a little more negotiating power, no?
Yeah, well, that's right. But the reality is also, I think you're seeing this in statements by the European Union and others. Look, people want to have a good relationship and a productive relationship with the US. They're not going to play silly games around this. They know that in the end, they'll need to enter into some form of arrangement, whether it's a full agreement, a binding agreement. But to think that everything's changed a little bit, and I think that's what we're going to see again. But I wouldn't bank for my full negotiating position on the decision of the first decisions we've seen. There's a whole process to be gone through. And as I said, the administration is perfectly within its rights to try to seek to achieve their aims by alternate methods, and they'll continue to do that. So I'd be very careful about the whole process of using that additional leverage other than actually realizing that you have it. And that gives you some power in negotiations as well.
You posted something on X back in April regarding the impact of global tariffs, and I would love to talk about it now. You posted this, quote, businesses need practical, forward-looking solutions to rebuild trust and stability in global trade. If the tariffs are ultimately struck down, would that rebuild trust and stability? What does that look like?
There's an opportunity. As I said, the reality here is the US, even though it makes up only 13% of global trade, is the greatest economy in the world. Everybody wants to deal with the US to the extent they can. So it's in the interest of parties to find the basis for trust. And the basis for trust is really about economic growth, because we all know that economic growth feeds and fuels opportunity for cities, families, businesses all over the place. So there is common cause here. The question is, can we take that common cause and build it out to actually enable a system that can operate to the interests of the US and the global world? We already have a system that does that. The reality is that system is actually not as relevant as it must be for the 21st century. It needs to be revitalized. It's in everyone's interest to revitalize the multilateral trading system. For heaven's sake, it's the multilateral, it's that trading system that's allowed so many people globally to come out of poverty. I mean, with the challenges to develop assistance, a double whammy with an erosion of the system will have a devastating effect in developing and emerging economies in Africa, Latin America, and Asia. That's not anyone's intention.
I want to get your reaction to something that President Trump was asked earlier this week, because apparently, reportedly, Wall Street analysts are calling his chaotic, his on again, off again tariff policies taco trade, meaning Trump always chickens out. Is that how the international business community views him? Because we saw this last week with the EU. He threatens 50% tariffs on the EU. A few days later, he walks that back. He takes that down. Does the international business community think that he's constantly turning this off, turning this on, and chickening out?
Well, look, let me be very clear. I mean, we respect enormously the elected president of the United States of America. That office is one which we admire, respect, and have confidence in. And of course, the president is Donald Trump. So, as night follows day, we respect the president. The reality is that the way in which he is approaching this process to seek leverage for the US is causing a lot of the confusion and uncertainty. Now, is that the intent, or is the intent simply for leverage for negotiation? I don't think the intent is to stymie and limit economic growth globally, or even for the US. We've already seen some of the numbers come off in the US. So we really need to understand better what the framework is that will ultimately emerge here. What the rest of the world is really saying is that they want to engage with the US, but they also want to engage on a rules-based nature with the US, not a power-based nature with the US, and they want agreements they reach to be enforceable.
I'm curious, as someone who has such a network with the international business community, what do you think is missing from the conversation when it comes to tariffs, when it comes to these legal challenges facing them, when it comes to the trade negotiations? I mean, what do you think is really missing, especially from the American perspective?
Well, I mean, what's missing here is an understanding that the unintended consequences of the approach that's being taken is to hurt families. People do not know in their local communities and in the businesses which are part of those communities and those businesses that are part of broader economies, supply chains, what is going to happen next. So that makes it very difficult for them to act with certainty. And of course, that delays things, as I said before, that is a drag on growth. It's stopping people filling positions. It's actually forcing people into stress and anxiety. That's what's missing from this equation. It's the human context. It's the human implications. And I genuinely believe that it's better understood that the global business community, the business community in the United States, the business community in Zambia, the business community in Argentina, they simply want to get on, build better businesses, create prosperity, and allow the families that they support to prosper. That is a really important dimension here. It's almost too abstract. It's almost always about negotiating positions. There are real people involved, and real people in the real economy are getting really hurt.
And to that point, I cover politics, and a lot of the conversations I have regarding President Trump's policies, not just when it comes to trade, when it comes to other things too, is this phrase "unintended consequences" of this happens because of X, Y happens, and that's not even what was supposed to happen here. So, what do you think is the biggest unintended consequence here? A, and B, from what you're saying, it sounds like the international business community really feels like they're almost stuck in the mud here, trying to figure out what's President Trump's next move, when they can make their next move. When do you think that they can just get on with it and make their next move?
Oh, I think when there's greater clarity. I mean, I think everyone was hoping there's a G7 finance ministers meeting coming up presently. I think everyone was hoping there would be a lot more clarity that would emerge from the US position. I think Secretary Bessent has made an incredibly effective interlocutor in the global business community about the intentions here. So we're looking for those sort of signals with the kind of to and fro around the judicial process here and the legal underpinnings. That will probably be harder to deliver in Canada at the G7 meeting. We would hope that by the time we get to the G20 meeting at the end of the year, there's a lot more clarity here. But nothing is in a way taken for granted. I mean, just when you think you have all the answers, a different set of questions are emerging, and it's really straining business. Even the largest businesses that are able to have war rooms, do scenario planning, they actually would admit that they themselves did not imagine the consequences that they're seeing now. Think about small businesses. They don't have those resources. They just want to know for the next 6 months what they can do.
So then to that point, what is your biggest question that you have right now?
Oh, well, frankly, from our perspective is when will the US and on what terms will the US be able to participate in the revitalization of the multilateral trading system? Because that recognition that the system and the parties that actually operate it, businesses want that to happen, would be very valuable for us. We would like the willing participation of the US in ensuring that a rules-based multilateral system which enables trade to take place with certainty across borders and increase economic opportunity and development absolutely happens.
And between now and then, I mean, what signals are you looking out for to see if the United States is moving in that direction?
Well, I think that we're seeing a continued commitment by the president and the administration to trying to find the levers for economic growth and opportunity for the US. And I think that there's a legitimate position that is held that if the US grows, then the global economy will grow. But that alignment is not taking place at the moment. The US economy is not growing at the pace that people would like. If the US economy becomes less engaged or connected to the global economy, then it won't have the positive impact. So we would like to see that kind of holistic view about the growth of the US economy driving and supporting the growth of the rest of the global economy become integral to the discussions and the statements made by the administration.
Secretary General, I appreciate your insights today. And as we see more movement when it comes to tariffs, when it comes to global trade, which honestly, the updates seem to be coming in by the minutes these days, I hope you come back on and break them down with me. Thank you so much for your time today. You're welcome back anytime.
Thanks for your time. Great to meet you.